the people that said that after you've been living for more than 10 years here in U.S., you can apply for some sort of visa. Is it that true?
So that's another half-truth that's we often hear about on TV or the radio. If you are in deportation proceedings, that means that immigration has caught you and has put you in front of a judge, and you are actually in the pipeline to be deported unless you can provide some kind of application to stay in the country. One of the defenses that only exists in front of the immigration judge is called cancellation of removal, or the 10-year pardon, as they call it. And if you've been here over 10 years and you have a relatively clean slate, and you have a qualifying relative, a child, whatever, any minor child who's a U.S. citizen or a legal resident, or a parent who's a resident, or a spouse who's a resident or a citizen, if you have one of those qualifying relatives, and here's the big other half of the truth that people don't talk about, and you can prove that that person will suffer extreme and unusual hardship. And I'm not making those words up. That's actually the law says you have to prove extreme and unusual hardship. Then you can win your case. And the statistics have shown that a very small percentage, less than 10% of the people who apply for this, many times it's less than 5%, actually win the 10-year pardon, because it's so difficult to show extreme and unusual hardship. You normally need a child who is in special education, or a parent who is disabled who depends on you completely, or you have to be a single parent with 4 kids and no way to support yourself in another country. It becomes very difficult to win that 10-year pardon. But if you listen to TV and radio, they make it sound like you could just fill out a form and send it in, pay the fee, and you will become legal, after a small bureaucratic process, and that's absolutely untrue. So again, that 10-year pardon, yes, it exists, but it's usually the one that is, hardly used unless you're ready to, unless you really have to. It's an all or nothing defense in front of the immigration judge, essentially. Now, if people aren't in deportation, they could have, of course, turned themselves in, which I don't do. There are attorneys or other organizations that might advocate or provide services to charge money to facilitate you turning yourself in to get in front of an immigration judge. I obviously don't, like that approach and don't participate in that strategy because it is all or nothing. And so I advise my clients to steer clear of that type of representation, because so much can go wrong when it seems like you have an easy case. Instead, we look at other avenues for people to become legal. There are some avenues out there. Just as I mentioned earlier, the U visa for victims of crimes. It's surprising to many people, it shouldn't be though, that 68% or more of all immigrants, they or someone in their household has been a victim of a violent crime. That includes domestic violence. And so therefore they can, in many instances, if they've cooperated with the police and with law enforcement, can apply for something called the U visa. And it is a pathway to permanent residence under certain circumstances, and then later on to citizenship. And so if 68% of folks out there have the possibility, not that they get it automatically, they should really investigate that aspect of immigration. But how many times do you hear that on TV or on the radio, whether it's in English or Spanish? I think Spanish language television has a special, maybe once per year, about victims of trafficking, victims of violence, and talks about the U visa, or the Violence Against Women's Act, which also provides a lot of relief to certain immigrants. And those are areas where we can be doing so much more for people if we gave them that information. The U visa, for instance, if you are eligible and qualify for it, you can have your spouse as a derivative who will also can also obtain the visa. Your minor children, If you're a minor child, you can get your parents their U visa. Also, if you're a minor child, you can get your brothers and sisters their derivative U visa. So actually, it reaches the entire family. It's designed really well in that aspect, in that it does promote family unity by, you know, addressing the rest of the family unit. Those are things that, you know, that I present on because they're never talked about on TV or radio, and they're actually a much more realistic opportunity for many immigrants compared to the 10-year pardon. So yeah, again, that 10-year pardon is one of those, you get half the story, unfortunately, on that.
How many of the Latino community are victims of violent crimes, did you say?
The reports vary. On average, you know, you look at all the reports out there, it's about 68%. So it's a large, very large number, relatively to the those with legal status or U.S. citizens. Immigrants are simply victimized much more because of their vulnerability and because of the lack of enforcement and protection that they receive. So again, it was under the Bush administration that this was implemented. Back in 2000 or 2001. This was implemented by executive order, and it continues to this day. It's not perfect. It's a very slow process. However, there are so many more people who are eligible for it than those who apply, that we really, it's incumbent upon us to really give them this information.
So I have a question, Arturo. I have a lot of these children are being removed from their parents because they've been neglected. So the grandparents taking care of those children, would those be considered children of violence?
No, but that brings up a good point. For those of you who are working with children who have been abandoned, abused, or neglected, if they receive an order from a judge, whether that be a dependency neglect judge, or that's a probate judge who gives guardianship to even someone who's not a grandparent or not a blood relative, or even a family law court for custody that gives a single parent custody over a child due to abandonment, neglect, or mistreatment by one or both parents, we can also apply for those children as special immigrant juveniles. And of course, that's another complex area, but we've been doing that. Many more immigration attorneys have been working in that area due to the 60,000 children that showed up on the border in the summer of 2014 from Central America, from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, many of whom are still detained to this day in either juvenile detention, immigration juvenile detention facilities, or the infamous family detention facilities. So special immigrant juvenile status is another strategy that we have for children who are here.
Those children are incarcerated?
Yes. You know, President Obama, the deporter-in-chief, as some people have tagged him, implemented a policy of very swift detention and put those children on the fast track in front of the deportation judges, or what we call removal proceedings. And so those children, the idea was the Obama administration wanted to send a message to Central America to discourage people from sending their children unaccompanied. Because you saw children, very small infants coming with one parent, or little kids, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, coming unaccompanied by anyone. And if they can't find a family member or a friend of the family here who is willing to sign for them under U.S. Human Services, then they stay in detention until they can find a way out, or until they are deported from this country.
How many children are we housing in detention in this country?
I don't have that number offhand, but there are various lawsuits. It's very easy to find that information because there are various lawsuits against the famous one is Dilley, Texas. A number of them have been shut down for different reasons, like the one in Artesia, New Mexico. But children are being shipped to Pennsylvania, and Illinois and many other parts of the country to handle the large number of detainees that have been required by this policy in the Obama administration.
That's appalling to me.
It is, and you know, the very few lucky ones, relatively proportionally small, have been able to find a family member or friend of family, and then at that point, that friend of the family member, friend of the family, is able to hopefully seek help. And so I have about 40 such clients that have found a family member or friend of the family, and then have come to me for services then. A large number of our chapter members from the American Immigration Lawyers Association volunteers to go down to these detention centers to take trips down to provide legal services. And it's just wonderful what our organization has done in terms of volunteering to help, but there's not enough. There are too many kids for the organization to help them all. And many of the communities, as you may have seen back in 2014 and 2015, protested and said they didn't want the kids in their neighborhoods or in their state. I think it was Nebraska that was one of the biggest protesters against the federal government housing children in their state. Other states.
Detaining
Yes.
children in their state.
Mm-hmm, that's right.
So if those children were able to find a family member or a friend, then is there a path to legal citizenship for them, or?
Yes. So, for instance, some of my clients are with a friend of the family, an uncle or a godparent, and then that person goes into one strategy. We send them to probate court to request formal guardianship, and the judge in that guardianship order can say the guardianship is needed due to abandonment, neglect, or abuse, and that it's in the best interest of that child to not return to their home country. And if we get the right wording and right order from that probate judge for a guardianship, then that child has the opportunity to file for special immigrant juvenile status, which is actually what it's called, the application. And then when a visa becomes available, to apply for permanent resident status. There's also single parents who are here, some of my clients, and the other parent has abandoned or neglected them, or they fled from that parent due to abuse to them or the child. And they simply go into custody court. Not simply, it's, into family law court and request custody on that basis. And if the judge, again, gives us a similar order, like I described in the probate court, we can also apply for those children for special immigrant juvenile status. The parent can't, but the child can. Mm-hmm. So children do have a few more opportunities. And of course, the traditional dependency and neglect, if you have a child that is brought into dependency and neglect, that judge can give an order and make that child a ward of the state. And as a ward of the state, they can apply for special immigrant juvenile status as well. So, of course, we're trying everything we can to keep these children here and help them to be safe and find the rest of their family or establish a life here. So we're filing a lot of political asylum for many children as well, as either a backup or as a primary defense to keep them in the country.
Arturo, we have 4 minutes, and I want to end on time just so we honor everyone's time here. But in the beginning, you talked about how there hadn't been any change to immigration law because we were all benefiting from that we had those that were immigrants here, that they were paying into the system through sales tax, and that then they didn't weren't recipients of Social Security, but yet they were helping to fund that. If we moved in a direction of amnesty, how would we, as a community, how would we all benefit from that? And paint the picture for us if there was immigration reform and children and families did have a legal path to citizenship and could stay together and didn't have to live in the shadows. and did have rights that were equal to those of us that are citizens. Paint the picture of how that would benefit both those children and those families, but all of us as a community.
So immediately you would see a safer community, a safer country where you would have a population that was not preyed upon because they would have rights. So immediately public safety would increase so much. And that's why the National Association of Police Chiefs pushed the U visa because they wanted to see immigrant communities participating in the justice system and helping bring people to justice and be a part of the community and keep everyone safe as a whole. We would see public safety increase, it'd be multiplied, it would be incredible. Education-wise, we would see so many more parents involved in their children's education. We would see all these children that we already see who are wonderful talents, who are so smart, who are so dedicated to their studies, be able to go to college, be able to contribute. We would see even more people contributing into the Social Security system and into the tax system if we brought them out of the shadows. And that would benefit us even more than we already do receive. And we would see a better sense of unity and of justice within all communities that would help to alleviate the issues like you identified in many areas of the country, like Lamar. I think the state of Georgia appears to be like Lamar, but across the entire state, including in its capital in Atlanta, it's so discriminatory. And that sense of segregation and disempowerment really hurts the entire community. So you can see, I think, a better nation for it, a safer nation, a more educated nation, a better economic nation, all across the board. Absolutely, I think immigrants work hard, many times harder than U.S.-born, and I think many people agree that work ethic is just incredible. The dedication to family and honesty and loyalty to your word is something that we all could use more of in the United States, and we don't see enough of it. So I would say we'd see great benefit if we brought any immigration reform, especially a widespread, comprehensive reform that provided relief to everyone who's in the shadows. Thank you.
So we're 715 family leaders, working in now it's going to be 13 communities across the state. If we could do one thing to help bring an opportunity for a legal path to citizenship for these children and families, what action would you recommend that we take?
I would say to bring good information to your communities and to really encourage folks at the same time not to watch and not to listen to the media. They're better off if they never get their information from television or radio. And instead, we provide at least once a year or twice a year, if not more, forums where people can get direct and honest and important, helpful information about immigration. But yet get them off of the media pipeline that is just causing so much confusion. And again, it causes disempowerment. Mm-hmm. People have truths. They are so disempowered, they don't know what to believe. They come into even my office and say, I don't believe you. You're telling me this because I heard it differently on TV so much. But we would empower people if we give them correct information. And we can do that as English speakers, as those with legal status. We can easily do that. There are many attorneys like myself who would provide that information for free. And it would help those folks better than listening to the television.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being our special guest tonight. We really appreciate it, and we've learned so much. And to all of those that called in tonight, signed on to your computers, I just want to thank you for participating. As a follow-up, we are going to have the kind of forum, Arturo, that you just talked about, and we'll have it in Spanish so that our family leaders that speak Spanish can, get the information in their own language, and then they can take that out into those communities. So thank you for joining us tonight and for being part of this. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. And if you'll hang out with me just for a moment, I would appreciate it.